Hello there, I'm Marc Fennell.
And I'm Avani.
And welcome to a brand new season of India Now. Coming up on this show over the next 6 weeks, Avani, myself and a whole bunch of new friends will explore what is now thought to be the most populous nation on earth. We're talking about a country of more than 1.4 billion people and the stories that make it whole.
And on tonight's show, we're going to look at the role of the Sari in telling women's stories and why Air India's massive order of new aircraft is important.
Well, I think it's really the story of India. India is obviously a huge market in terms of population. It is one of the top 5 economies in the world.
Now, before we begin, Avani, you are actually the ABC South Asia correspondent. We have you for the next couple of weeks here on the desk, and that is the perfect opportunity to work through the mountain of news. I'm looking at it here. There's a lot that's happened pretty much since last season.
Yeah, Mark, it has been a crazy time to be based in India, especially the last 6 months or so. We're seeing India become the world's most populous nation. It's taking over China. Huge milestone for the country. This year, it's going to become the world's fastest growing economy. So that's huge for a country that wants to be this big superpower. We're seeing Australia and India relations coming together like we've never seen before in history. But I reckon the biggest thing is Narendra Modi's unshakable grip on power and this clampdown on dissent that we've been seeing. So a lot to cover on this program.
Well, let's start with what's happening in India now. And of course, the biggest news of the week was the shooting death of former MP Atiq Ahmed on live television.
Yeah, Mark, shootings like these have gone up in parts of India, but the live broadcast obviously got a lot more attention. So Atiq Ahmed and his brother were being taken from prison to hospital by 20 police. Journalists surrounded them. It was being streamed live on TV, and then they were shot dead at close range by gunmen pretending to be journalists.
Oh my God!
Yeah, it's really confronting vision of the former politician who was one of the biggest gangsters in India's most populous state, Uttar Pradesh. He'd been in jail for 4 years, convicted of kidnapping, but he was facing murder and assault charges as well. And 2 weeks earlier, Mr. Ahmed actually asked India's top court for extra protection. His lawyer had said Mr. Ahmed was worried something like this could happen to him and questioned whether the trip to hospital was actually necessary.
नहीं एक रूटीन चेकिंग था ये तो थाने में भी हो सकता था डॉक्टर साहब को बुला के अगर रूटीन चेकिंग तो कोई विशेष जरूरी नहीं था कि उनको रोज मेडिकल कराया जाए हाँ.
So the state government have ordered an investigation, but these things actually aren't that uncommon, are they?
Yeah, Mark, it's really interesting. The UN has actually raised concerns about police killings in India, especially in the state of Uttar Pradesh. We think about these issues in countries like the US, but people wouldn't realise it's really common in India as well. And what experts are saying is that normal Indian people kind of see this as just day-to-day activity, that it's pretty normal. They say that people have accepted that the rule of law is kind of jeopardised in some situations. And so for a country like India that says it's the biggest democracy in the world, people are really questioning the role of the police, the justice system, prosecutors, how this all comes together in the criminal system. And for a country like Australia that's really coming together with India, experts are saying, well, it needs to be wary of how things like this are operating when the Australian government keeps saying it has shared values with India.
Well, for more on this, we are joined by Aditya Menon, the political editor for the online news outlet The Quint. Aditya, welcome to India Now.
Hi.
Aditya, Atiq Ahmed had actually approached the Supreme Court for additional protection. So what does this case tell us about the justice system in India and what people think of it over there?
I think the Indian judiciary is really being scrutinized and in a very strong way. On many issues, the judiciary is seen to be acting slowly and not showing the kind of urgency it should on issues of human rights and on issues of the provisions, on upholding the provisions of the Constitution. So I think the criticism of the judiciary in this particular case is quite justified. Atiq Ahmed had a petition that he's fearing for his life. He said that this entire trip to Uttar Pradesh was probably not necessary. Whatever had to be done could have been done through video conferencing. So he had this suspicion. The chief minister of the state had already said in the state assembly that he's going to, destroy this particular gangster. So it was obvious that that Atiq Ahmed's life was under threat, and the judiciary was found wanting in this particular case. There's no doubt about that.
It has been reported that one of the gunmen shouted a battle cry for Hindu nationalism afterwards. Now, the Ahmeds, for context, they're from a Muslim minority. We've been talking a lot about religious tensions. From your point of view, do you see those religious tensions getting worse at the moment?
I think what we saw in this particular case is the use of Hindu nationalism to sort of justify criminality. And this is becoming an increasingly common trend. This is only the latest example of this. More recently, we also had the alleged mastermind of the killing of Punjabi singer Sidhu Moosewala. The mastermind is called Lawrence Bishnoi. He gave an interview to a TV channel in which he claimed to be a Hindu nationalist, claimed to be against anti-nationals, and sort of insinuated that Moosewala was soft on separatists. Again, like the Atiq Ahmed case, Moosewala belongs to a minority community. He's a Sikh, and Bishnoi is a Hindu. So even that, and there are also reports that the killers of Atiq Ahmed were inspired by Lawrence Bishnoi. So there's clearly an ecosystem in which criminality is being justified by using Hindu nationalism, and there is some kind of symbiotic relationship between these two things.
There is nothing to suggest that these gunmen have any connection to Modi's BJP, but there are critics that say that this is an example of the government ruling by fear. What do you think about those comments?
So one of Atiq Ahmed's shooters is a person called Lavlesh Tiwari. At least according to his Facebook profile, he claims to be part of the BJP. But the BJP has not verified this at all. But the person clearly seems to have that kind of political inclination. He has put up pictures of himself with BJP leaders. Then there's also the response to the killing. A number of BJP leaders, they ended up justifying the killing, saying that it's some kind of divine justice. You had a very senior minister, Swatantra Dev Singh, in the Uttar Pradesh government. He said that this is justice from heaven that has taken place. So when you have ministers themselves justifying this, sure, there may not be any clear links between the killers and the BJP, but the BJP is clearly, elements within the BJP are using this killing to sort of further up their own base.
But what is Narendra Modi's role in all of this? Because we see incidents like this, but he doesn't actually come out and condemn these comments or anything that happens. So where does he stand?
So Narendra Modi has created an aura around himself in which he is considered above any of the regular governance related things. He's less of, for his supporters, he's less of an administrator and more of a messianic figure. So even in his speeches, he never talks about policies or particular initiatives because he doesn't want to be held accountable on those counts. The ministers and the chief ministers, they do the talking on those things, and they also get the blame on those things. Modi is now presenting himself as some kind of a visionary leader of the country. So given his leadership style, it's not surprising that he has not referred to any of these events.
Aditya, it's been estimated that 1/3 of India's parliament has faced criminal charges, and some of those charges are actually quite serious. That seems an astonishingly high stat. Why is that the case?
So these kind of people with criminal background, people with vast financial resources, most of them are of that variety. They are very useful for political parties. They provide political muscle, they provide political capital, they provide financial resources to political parties. And that's why most parties find them useful. No political party, at least in the state of Uttar Pradesh, can claim that they haven't compromised with these elements. Atiq Ahmed himself has been a member of at least 3 parties in his 30-odd years in politics. And there are every party in Uttar Pradesh, be it the BJP, the Samajwadi Party, BSP, Congress, all of them have compromised with criminal elements at some point of time or the other.
All right, Aditya Menon from the Quint, thank you so much for joining India Now.
Thank you.
In other stories, much has been made of the news that India has already or is about to become the world's most populous nation, but the Chinese government is having none of it. Now, when the Chinese Foreign Ministry was asked what they thought about this development, the Foreign Ministry spokesperson Wang Wenbin threw this incredible shade.
一个国家的人口红利，既要看总量，更要看质量；既要看人口，更要看人才。中国有14亿多人口，其中劳动年龄人口近9亿。 劳动年龄人口平均受教育年限达10.9年，新增劳动力受教育年限更是达到14年。正如李强总理指出的那样，中国的人口红利没有消失，人才红利正在形成，发展动力依旧强劲。
So size matters, but talent matters more.
Marc, it's a bit like feuding people in a playground sometimes, you know, India and China just kind of throwing shade at each other. But it is interesting to see that China is retaliating in this way because a lot of people are coming out in the last couple of weeks saying, wow, this is a big deal for India. This could take it to the next superpower. It could overtake China on the geopolitical scale. But what's interesting is India will be looking at a lot of the successes of China, right? Issues like education that we just heard there. India really needs to do that. I've been speaking to young people on the ground. They're saying, we want more jobs. We want more skills. So the Indian government will be looking to the Chinese government and thinking, where did they succeed? Where can we follow in that respect? Because India wants to be up there in the top 3 economies. It wants to beat China if it can. It wants to be up there with the US.
Can it in time? I mean, on the metric that he's put out there, do you think it's just a matter of time before India can overtake in that particular regard?
Kind of depends on who you speak to, but every expert I spoke to in India said, yeah, India can do this. It's going on the right track. The Indian government is investing in jobs and education. It can actually get there, but if it doesn't, it's got a pretty dire path. It could push people further into poverty. Things could get actually really bad when there's such a big population and they don't have the skills or the jobs to get there. So, look, a lot of issues. It's a bit of a split path, but people are pretty positive of where India's going.
Now, the government has also responded to attempts to legalise same-sex marriage in India, haven't it?
Yeah, this is another big step because India, the sanctity of marriage, it's such a big deal, right? You would know it's such a culturally important institution. So same-sex couples have come forward and they're petitioning to the courts to make it legal. And if India does this, it'll just become the second in Asia to do so, a pretty culturally conservative area on many regards. But what's kind of concerning for the LGBTQI population is the Indian government is really opposing this, saying that it is ruining the religious institutions in India. There's a lot of concern and it is actively fighting this. So it's going to be interesting to see over the next few weeks how this plays out. But we have seen a little bit of progress in India. We're seeing pride marches. We're seeing the queer community coming out and displaying their sexuality in a way that we haven't before. We're seeing it in popular culture, in movies. And so this is a really exciting time for a lot of LGBTQI couples. But yeah, it could get really dirty in terms of what we're seeing play out in court.
Yeah, I didn't realise just how kind of forthright on this issue Modi's government was. Is there a lot of votes in this kind of issue for them, I guess, on that conservative end of the spectrum?
Well, it kind of plays to the Modi government's strengths in that it is conservative, it is trying to uphold its cultural values, and that plays well in politics for the Indian government leading up to the election next year. But there are critics that are coming out and saying, well, no, this is a different India. This is an India of progress, one that is accepting of people of all backgrounds. And, you know, you do hear Modi and his ministers talk about that. We're a secular nation. We're a country that embraces everyone. So, look, it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out.
I should say, I think there's something about this show that might be slightly cursed when it comes to India and temperatures, because when we started this show last season, we were talking about how India's temperatures were hitting 40 degrees, and now we're back at a totally different time of year, and it's happening again.
Yeah, I was melting when I was speaking to you last year, and look, it's going to be the same when I get back to India, and it's actually pretty scary, right, Marc? Like, you're sitting there thinking, oh, this is just a once in a several year event, right? It's not going to happen again. Now I'm in the second year of my posting in India, and it's happening again. And just a study came out like last week saying that this is something that's induced by climate change, and there's so many studies that keep saying that. And the concern from India, experts on the ground there is, well, the global south, it's on the front line of climate change. Countries like Australia, industrialised countries, need to be doing more to make sure that the poorest people in these countries aren't copping the brunt in the way that they are. But these studies are saying that the Indian government is doing a lot to kind of fix areas, for example, making areas less concrete, building more roofs that are lighter so they're not absorbing the sun as much, planting more trees. But there's still so much the Indian government needs to be doing to make sure that as climate change gets worse, people can live in these cities.
Now, the sari is, of course, one of the most recognisable items of Indian clothing. It's worn by women all over the subcontinent. But, of course, saris are so much more than just a piece of clothing, and each one tells a story. This story was shot by Tejas Bhatt.
Should I even answer that question? I have over 150 saris.
It's what's called a Kashmiri embroidery.
It's very subtle, very appropriate for a day wear and an evening wear.
The girls and the women stopped wearing sari. And a large part of that was, it was not considered cool to wear a sari. But I'm so glad now that it is coming back and it is becoming cool to wear saris again.
This sari is very special to me because this is my mum's sari.
My mum, my grandmother, my aunties, everybody just wore saris day in, day out.
My collection is not very big, but each and every sari is a curated piece.
In my imagination, this wanton need to kind of have a big collection of saris, at least 1,000 of them, but I don't have space in my wardrobe.
Each sari, it has a story. It's like a snapshot of special memories, events, and people.
So the sari I'm wearing is my mom's sari. It's a cotton sari with a lot of print work done on it. I have no clue on when she got it and where she got it. I actually inherited it when she passed away in November. So it's a very pretty special sari for me.
So the stories, they actually add flesh to the sari. And I think it adds meaning to when I wear a sari, to know that yes, there is a story behind this sari that I'm wearing today.
The word sari comes from the Sanskrit word that means a strip of cloth.
As far as I know, saris have been worn in India for eons.
It dates back to the times of the Indus Valley civilization.
Way before Alexander the Great invaded India, even before the Mughals invaded India.
Saris obviously have revolutionized the way we live, the way we drape, the way we present, and the way we interact in our social communities.
I have been wearing saris since I was a teenager.
The first sari I ever got, which was truly mine, was my wedding sari, which was 24 years ago. And that was the first sari I got.
It is very traditional when a girl gets married that the in-laws and your parents give a set of saris, a set of clothes. So I got around 10 saris from my mother-in-law and 10 saris from my mum.
Now I treasure it a lot because it was a gift and a symbol of the new life I was going to have. So that's the first sari I had.
I remember vividly the color of the sari was like a sea green color, and that was a special day for me. I was getting graduated. I can wear this masterpiece any time in my life, on any occasion.
I do have one sari which is very precious to me, which is from my grandmother. It is in tatters, literally, because silk saris, they actually degenerate over a period of time. But I still have kept it. And I've kept it just to show to, if my son ever gets married, to show to his wife or his partner, say, well, this is the sari that belongs to your ancestors.
The saris have also sort of grown and modernized in terms of the fabric, in terms of the weaves, in terms of the choices of the colors and the work that has been done, depending on the type of sari that I wear. I feel that the sari has a profound effect on bringing a different personality in me. I've noticed that the different colors mean or give me a real profound feeling of strength, resilience, or empowerment.
Every time I see saris, all I can think about is like the level of glee my mum has when she gets invited to a wedding. She's like, finally an excuse to wear a sari. This is like the main thing that she'll wear it for.
Totally. You don't just wear it to the grocery store. But
unless
people
you're my
do,
grandmother.
or in India, it's worn everywhere. But I love that comment in that package about how they've become cool now. Because I remember when I was younger growing up being like, oh, saris, you know, it's for the older people. I'm not wearing them. But now you see these awesome designers in India, Sri Lanka, Pakistan and all over South Asia making really cool saris, really interesting ones with different kind of drapes, and it is cool. I'm like, I'm going to be rocking this at the pub in Sydney, you know? Like,
well, actually, even just looking at that story there was some beautiful fabrics in there, and I think you can kind of see that there's always been this evolution to it. Although in my mind, I'm like always transported to like my grandmother's house, and that woman did everything in a sari.
yeah,
like everything.
Yeah, and the fabrics don't like go anywhere. They don't mess around. Whereas when I wear them, I'm like, how do you tuck in the pleats? Like, where do they go? Anyway.
You do a lot of like safety pin work?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, the punk rock sari. Yeah. It's something we keep talking about, right? India's economy is about to become the fastest growing in the world. A major indicator of that is the mind-boggling investment in infrastructure. Samuel Yang takes a look at how that's playing out in the aviation sector.
It's one of the biggest purchases in aviation history. 470 new aircraft ordered from Boeing and Airbus to give Air India a major revamp.
Enjoy Air India Boeing 787 Dreamliner. Amazing feel, amazing features.
The deal includes 400 short-haul planes and 70 long-haul, with 370 more aircraft on option. It's going to cost Air India over $70 billion.
Well, I think it's really the story of India, already one of the top 5 aviation markets in the world. Very strong GDP growth, over 6% this year, and increasingly a core part of international supply chains. From an aviation perspective, though, it has not been particularly well served by homegrown airlines.
The deal has been hailed by world leaders.
मैं एयर इंडिया और एयरबस को इस लैंडमार्क एग्रीमेंट के लिए बहुत-बहुत बधाई और शुभकामनाएं देता हूं.
This means that India has a serious focus in the Indo-Pacific region, specifically on Asia, because it will be operating these 400 single oil planes in this region, and 70 planes will be for the far away region such as United States, Canada, Latin America, Africa, Europe.
And it comes as India overtakes China as the world's most populous country and hopes to emerge as a powerful player on the global stage.
India currently wants to be a global power. Now it is the 5th largest economy in the world, but it aims for 3rd biggest economy after China and the United States. But currently, its fleet is outdated. So to emerge as a big power, it has to demonstrate its connectivity with the world, as more specifically in the Indo-Pacific region.
Buying a fleet of aircraft now gives it the opportunity to go through an incredible refresh. A lot of those ageing aircraft will be phased out as these aircraft come online.
Aviation experts say it will take about 10 years for the whole new fleet to be delivered. But the CEO says the first delivery is just around the corner.
Well, the first of the new aircraft comes in July of this year, just a couple of months away. That's a fleet of narrow-body aircraft. The first wide-body aircraft, an Airbus A350, commenced from about September of this year.
For years, the homegrown airline Air India has struggled to compete, losing customers to the Gulf carriers and other Asian airlines. And direct flights to India are reportedly hard to find.
So on its western flank, there are 3 major airlines: Emirates, Qatar, and Etihad. They are taking most of Indian passengers. Similar are in its eastern flank, there are 3 major airlines, that is Singapore, Thai and Malaysian airlines. So now India has to attract the passengers that are being taken by other airlines. India has a 32 million strong diaspora, and in Air India not being able to provide them the direct flights. So this diaspora has to use the flights from other countries.
India is a very interesting aviation market. It ought to be one of the world's strongest, most vibrant and important aviation markets, but it has for many years fallen behind.
The airline was nationalised in the 1950s under a socialist-leading government. Once a national icon, its reputation was tarnished over the years.
Under the government operations, it became more bureaucratic, and it started collapsing under its own weight. And by 2007, the Government of India put a red line for this. On an average, it had double the number of staff from the global average. And also there was sort of that within, there are so many seats have to be fixed for the government officials, whether at last moment these are filled or not.
In 2021, the airline was privatised, and the new owner Tata Group, India's major industrial conglomerate, is eager to renew its reputation and to make it a world-class airline.
In the 1960s and 70s, Air India was regarded as one of the best airlines in the world. International service, world-class standards. And although the last few decades haven't quite been so kind, we are very much focused on restoring a place at the very, very pinnacle of world aviation. And this order is clearly part and parcel of getting there.
Which aligns with the Indian government's interest as a rising power in the Indo-Pacific.
India being part of expanding in the Indo-Pacific region, mainly the member of the quadrilateral security dialogue. So it's being feeling its presence. And that presence is also being linked through its diaspora, Indian origin people living in those countries. So it wants to connect. And that connection cannot be through the security or through the power, but it is using the soft power. India wants to connect itself with the Western world, and not only connect, wants to develop interdependency.
There's a very, very strong push for the Indian economy to be increasingly connected internationally.
It's thought the ambitious deal will generate jobs, trade and tourism, and bring benefits in travel safety and the environment too.
Indian Railways doesn't have the world's best safety record. It's fair to say it's much, much safer to fly, and certainly than to drive. These new aircraft are significantly better in terms of how much fuel they use, or more to the point, how little fuel they use, and they are significantly more environmentally sound, which is already very positive for the Indian aviation market and for the Indian environment more generally. They emit 20-30% less or fewer emissions than the aircraft they'll be replacing. That is a really significant improvement.
They really do have their work cut out for them, though. I mean, I was just thinking about how, on the one side you've got the Gulf airlines like Emirates, and the other side, things like Singapore, and they have had a good 20 years to really build up this sort of reputation, and they've really carved out a pretty significant kind of the market. I mean, I guess it'll be interesting to see just how long it takes for India to compete, Air India.
Well, you understand why those other companies want to tap into India, because the diaspora is just huge. Qantas has just opened up this new leg from Bangalore to Sydney and Melbourne, and it's because the Indian diaspora is now the largest in Australia, and it's just going to keep growing. We're seeing all these population stories, right? But I think people like the convenience of going direct. I mean, personally, when I'm coming home to Australia, I just want to get on a 12-hour flight and get off in Australia. And I think that's where Air India is going to have an edge in appealing to the Indian market.
All right, that is all we've got time for on the program tonight.
We'll be back next week looking at the challenges to press freedoms in India and, of course, with all the latest news. Good night.
We'll see you then.